As we all know, there are various genres in the world of fiction: horror, supernatural crime, dark crime, psychological thrillers, and LGBTQ plus horror are just a few that this very talented author has covered. I first learned about him through Blackthorn book tours when I was given the Bedwetter Journal of a Budding Psychopath, and needless to say, I was impressed. This particular title is quite possibly one of my favorites now, but he has written so much more that I'm just as anxious to dive into. But rather than just listen to me talk about his work and successes, let's speak to author Lee Allen Howard himself. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Sure thing.
So, you have a bachelor's in English, a
Yeah,
master's in biblical studies,
correct.
and a master's in writing popular fiction, and you're back in school again.
I am back in school again. The Seton Hill University, which is in Greensburg, PA, east of Pittsburgh, they started a Master of Arts program in writing popular fiction, meaning genre fiction.
Mhm.
And then and so I got my MA, Master of Arts, there in, how was it? I was there from 2004 to 2006. And then afterward, they expanded it to be an MFA program. So kind of turned out to be twice as long. So I'm halfway through. So I went back to school to get my F.
So I have to ask, how difficult has it been going back?
Um, I'm somewhat familiar with the program. There's a lot to do. I'm extremely busy. Um, so much to read and write all the time that it's hard for an old guy like me to keep up with it. But I mean, it's not, I love to read, and I often read dissertations about, fiction. So that's not a problem. It's just keeping up with the pace of the work while I'm also writing another complete novel. So,
How do you even have time to still write in between everything else?
well, my schoolwork, classwork takes precedence. I've got a class that I'm taking on pedagogy, which is the teaching of um, writing fiction, and which I don't know, I've always wanted to teach, but they say that people with MFAs, if they go for any kind of a college position, they're usually going to be teaching freshman comp, which doesn't sound very exciting to me. I didn't, I took freshman comp, but I didn't find it particularly enjoyable. Um, so where were we? What did you ask?
How you find time?
Oh, how I find time. Yeah, I've got a major on the schoolwork, so I got to do reading for that. So I've got two classes, the pedagogy class, and then the it's called readings in the genre.
Mm.
And there's a number of them. They could be of any flavor in genre. The one that was offered this term was called The Haunted, and it's taught by Scott A. Johnson, who is a published author. And we get to read books like we started out with Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House
Oh, that's a
and
good one.
Richard Matheson's Hell House.
Wow.
Um, the Amityville Horror, and another one, Grave's End, by Elaine Mercado, which were supposed allegedly, real life ghost stories. And
Mhm.
now I'm into Stephen King's The Shining, and next month it'll be Blatty's The Exorcist. So I don't have any problem doing, that
Wow.
kind of reading as long as I don't fall asleep at night.
Wow, y'all are reading some great titles. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
Amityville's one
early
of my
on, like in,
favorites.
in in January and February, I got my pages done. I contracted to write 100 pages on my novel this term, 25 a month that I have to turn in on deadline. Everybody does. Um, so I'm up to about 120 pages. So I'm really done for the term, but I would like to be able to keep writing on it, if not every day, then every week. I'm not able to it. I have to get some of the schoolwork and the reading and the writing about the reading. There's
Yeah.
weekly questions and essays and research papers that I have to write on our assignments. So the schoolwork takes precedence, but I'm not going to fail because I haven't done my writing, because my 100 pages are already done.
Well, one of your books, I actually just learned this, Death Perception, that was written as a thesis, correct?
That was my first thesis in 2006, and it was supernatural crime. It is about a young man named Kenneth who discovers that he can discern the cause of death of the people that he cremates by toasting marshmallows over their ashes. So, he thinks this ability of discerning the cause of death is no big deal because they're already dead. He treats it as a game. However, what he discerns is different from what is listed on the death certificate, he finds himself in the midst of murderers who are trying to cover up their crimes. And so he has to use his abilities to, bring the residents of a personal care home where his mother lived to justice.
That I enjoyed it. I read every page. I literally couldn't put it down until I finished. It was so great.
I'm glad you liked it.
Now, that one, and also I have to ask you, where did you come up with the idea for the Bedwetter? That book was something. Oh my gosh.
The Bedwetters, it's pretty twisted. If you
Yeah.
like dark fiction, there's nothing supernatural about it. It is a psychological thriller, but it's a dark one, and it takes a look at a young man who has been mistreated by his parents, and he becomes maladjusted and becomes this killer. But I got the idea actually from somebody that I went to high school with. I remember one day, I think it was maybe 11th grade, 11th or 12th, something like that. There was this guy, I'm not going to give his name, but he was, fairly tall, really skinny, and had this long hair that was, like down over his shoulders, you know. So his hair was
Yeah.
pretty long. And then one day we came to school and his head was all buzzed. And I said, "Hey, man, you really got a haircut." And he got extremely upset and he couldn't talk to me
Oh
anymore.
wow.
And he ran off. And there was a girl standing there. And well, what was that about? And she says, "Don't you know? Every time he wets the bed, his parents shave his head as punishment."
Oh my gosh.
And so this really happened. And I think it was the fall, December of 2012. He came to mind. We weren't friends, close friends. Um, there were only 150 in my class, so we all knew everybody, but
Yeah.
we weren't close friends. But he came to mind, and I just kept thinking about it. It's like, what would that kind of treatment do to somebody? How would they develop? And so I got the idea that what's that? There's like three things that I can't remember the name of the either psychologist or social scientist that said that the three markers of psychopathy are bedwetting, fire setting, and hurting animals.
Mhm.
So I used that, did some research, used that to create this very dark character.
Yeah. That's putting it mildly.
And it took me, I started plotting and outlining it Christmas week at the end of 2012. I got it all I think, outlined by the end of January, and then by early April, I'd written the first draft. So I was like, this guy, like, I felt like I was possessed by this character, and it was, I mean, writing some of the things in his voice because it's written in first person
Mhm.
as a journal of, his thoughts, what he is doing now, what he did before, and the terrible things that he plans to do with a military fighting knife and a pair of electric trimmers.
Oh, wow. That book, absolutely. It was the actual first that I read by you.
Hmm.
And like I said in the intro, I got it from Blackthorn.
Hmm.
And when they sent it to me, the title was just, I don't know. I was like, I don't know what this could possibly be about. I mean, obviously a psychopath, but
Yeah.
still, it's like, wow. But it's the way you wrote it is just, it's captivating. You literally can't take yourself away from it. Does that make sense?
Yes, you can't look away.
You can't. I mean, it was really good. I mean, it is my favorite by you. I won't lie. I
Good.
I can't not like that book.
That's awesome because there are some people that really don't like it, and they tell me
Well,
in their reviews.
I am a sucker for dark fantasy. I actually literally research serial killers and stuff to try to
Hmm.
figure out their motivations and everything. So that was like right up my alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, okay, I have to know. You have the degree in biblical studies,
Yes.
and you were a reverend, correct?
Yes, it was. Um,
Okay. No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Um, yes, I was raised in a Christian home. My dad was a minister, Protestant minister, and my faith was kind of like up and down, during my youth. Um, but then I had, dramatic conversion experience when I think I was about 23. And so then I came into the charismatic movement at the time. I don't know if you know about it or any of the viewers will know about it, but it was a kind of a Pentecostal experience that happened in a lot of denominational churches where people were brought into the baptism in the Holy Spirit with speaking in tongues. So that happened in, what was that? Mid 80s. And I loved reading the Bible, studying the Bible, teaching the Bible. So I wanted to get some schooling about it. If if I'm presented with a problem or a challenge, it's, what's the answer? Read a book, go to school. Those are my two favorite things in the world: reading books and going to school, because I love to learn. So I did get a Master of Arts in Biblical Studies from a Pentecostal ministry.
Well, what made you go from that to the type of stuff I've read by you? I
Yes,
mean,
it's
that's a
very
totally different realm.
bipolar. It's darkness and light. um, well, I'd always loved spooky stories. And I don't know where I got my love of horror fiction from, because neither of my parents liked it or promoted it. I think it was in second grade. I got my hands on a book by Norman Bridwell, and people will recognize him. Uh, his claim to fame: he wrote the Clifford the Big Red Dog series. But
Okay.
he also wrote this book called How to Care for Your Monster. And it was a horrific and humorous take on um, what you would do to care for pets if you had Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and I think something else, for your pet. And I love that book. And so in second grade, I started writing stories that were full of skeletons and witches and blood. In fact, one story that I wrote in second grade, my teacher took it to the principal and showed him. I don't know whether she was concerned or she was impressed. I don't know. But anyway, the principal was the president of the local Lions Club in the little Indiana town where we lived at the time. And my father was a member of the Lions Club. And one meeting, Principal Sprunger fined my father a dime because the preacher's son had written such a horrific story filled with skeletons, witches, and blood. And that's the first, it was all in good, good humor, but that was the first time that money changed hands for my fiction. However, it did not find its way into my pocket because I would have went down to the White Cottage and bought me a little ice cream cone. Because they were a
Oh my
dime when I
gosh.
was little.
Oh my goodness.
So,
So you, well,
no,
you
I always
also
had a love
wrote
with
many
dark
books.
fiction. Go ahead.
You've also wrote many books that are not this particular genre,
Yes.
nonfiction, correct?
Yes.
And you write technological books and helping people in their writing processes and stuff. How did that come about?
I've always wanted to write. So, but I found that I wasn't very good at it. And so I needed some help. And they just didn't, in elementary school and high school, and even in undergraduate and college, I took a creative writing course, but there just wasn't a whole lot to do. So I started buying books. So starting back in the 80s and the 90s, I started buying books from companies like Writer's Digest books on how to write fiction. So I know I've read over 300, but it's probably closer to 500 books on the craft of fiction writing. So, and I would highlight my books and then I would transcribe my highlights into my computer so that I would have like a file of the best of here's how to write scenes, or here's how to do description or something like that. So I was kind of self-taught in that respect. So, and then of course, that wasn't good enough because I wasn't publishing as much as I'd like. So then, I forked out money to go to school.
Well, you also, from what I've seen, you own and founded Dark Cloud Press.
Yes.
Is that something you're still big into, or is that kind of
Not really big into? I guess I started that around the time when I was in school for my master's the first time, and came out with an anthology called Thou Shalt Not. And it was based on the Ten Commandments, where somebody in the story breaks one of the Ten Commandments with dire, deadly, or disastrous results. And so there was a section on each of the commandments. There's one about idolatry, there's one about adultery, there's one about murder. So I kind of combined my love of fiction and the Bible into this anthology, and it came out. It was pretty good. Then I kind of closed up shop for a while. And probably a decade later, I opened it back up, and I had always wanted to do an anthology about tales of blood and squalor. So I love squalor. If you've ever seen, have you ever seen, what is it? What's that show that I loved back in the 90s? Scully and Mulder, The X-Files.
X-Files? Yeah.
X-Files. They have an episode called Home about this family of inbred, derelict people who breed with their mother to produce more children. So that, but they lived in dirt and filth and squalor. They were poor, and so I've always loved squalorous conditions and combine it with crime or horror or something like that. So came out of that anthology. But I found that anthologies are not a big money making thing,
Really?
unless you get really something really popular.
Mm.
They don't sell real well, and I've never been that great at marketing, so it was more like, well, this is something that I've always wanted to do. So I did pay writers and put out some books that hopefully people will enjoy.
See, that's funny that you say that about anthologies. I always thought they were rather popular. I mean, I like them myself
It
personally.
it depends on, I guess, who publishes them and what their subject is, I guess,
Yeah.
that they choose for it. So
I've never seen, I mean, I see lots of horror and thriller anthologies and such like that, but I've never seen a romance anthology.
I'm sure, I'm sure there are, because romance is probably about the most popular of all the genres. Most genre books. This, this figure is old, but I had read somewhere or was taught in school the first time around that about 55% of genre books are romance books. Some kind of
Really?
romance. Yes.
Huh. Is that anything that you've considered writing, or have you written any romance?
Um, First time I went to school, in early 2000s, I, prided myself in hating romance, but because I didn't like to read it, and like Hallmark Channel romances and that, they were just like icky, icky, icky. But you know, as I continued to read more books, a lot of books, no matter what their genre is, even if they're horror, they have some kind of a romantic subplot in it.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to write something um, bigger, uh, then I needed to have more material than just my main plot. I could have a couple different kinds of subplots, and one of them could be romance. And romance gives you something for your protagonist, your main character, to care about. And if you put that person in jeopardy, their love interest in jeopardy, then it causes, suspense, and it invests the reader more in the plight of the
Yeah.
protagonist. So I did that with a novel that I called Dead Cemetery. It's not published yet. It's the one that I wrote after the Bedwetter, and it's horror. It's got a horror plot with a um, romance subplot. So it's like horror and gay romance together, and kind of a coming out story. So hopefully that finds a home soon.
It sounds great. It really does. So, okay, I asked this to all of the authors that I interview. What is some sage advice that you could give to upcoming authors, or just people in general trying to get into the field that have never really put themselves out there before?
Um, well, I'm sure this has been said before, but if you want to write, you need to read a lot, and that includes reading the types of books that you want to write. Like if you want to write horror, then you read horror, or thrillers, or crime, or police procedurals, or romance. But read widely also. Read popular books, genre books. Read your literary classics. Like some of my favorite books are The Great Gatsby. Love that book. I reread it every once in a while. Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea. Um, I think was it Steinbeck who wrote Of Mice and Men.
Mhm.
So good literature, and so reading and then writing. You have to practice. You have to start somewhere. So find a story, something small that you can think that you can write something, like that, and just give it a try. And then, give it to somebody, get their opinion, see if they say, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and then go back and revise it. Because I found that writing, when I first started writing when I was very young and I was working on a typewriter, um, I thought, well, it comes from my imagination. It's inspired, and when it comes out on my fingers onto the keyboard, then it's perfect. A load of crap. It's not perfect. You've got to do a lot of work and a lot of learning. And I also, I recommend that people read craft books. They're helpful. And there's a lot more of them now, good ones now, than there used to be like 20, 30 years ago. So I had, let me see, I had a group of maybe a dozen stories that I'd written and I'd sent them out and they got rejected. But I would be reading craft books and learning things, highlighting them. And then when I found a technique that a writer suggested, in their craft book, and I recognized that I'd been making a mistake and that I could fix it by using the technique that they explained in their book, I would go through all my stories, print them out, read them, and revise them and edit them to correct that issue. And some of these stories, Microsoft Word keeps statistics on how many times you edit a file. And some of these stories I edited 500 times at various points just to apply the techniques that I'd learned. And after 20, 25 years, I put that collection out in Perpetual Nightmares. And one of them I submitted to the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers for a new anthology called Secrets. And it won. It was the only one that the editors paid professional rates for. So,
Wow.
and it's something that I had started like way back in high school. But because I kept learning and I kept working on it, somebody eventually liked it and thought it was worth paying money for. So you're not going to learn to write in 5 minutes.
No.
I've been applying myself for well over 30 years, even longer than that. But, it's a process.
Right. Well, so tell us, before I let you go, what is next for Lee Allen Howard? I mean, what can we look forward to in the future from you?
Well, I landed an agent last summer, and then she immediately became sick and had to let all her clients go. So I'm looking for an agent again because I would like to spend more time writing and have somebody else take care of the submitting and the marketing and everything. So I'm still looking for an agent, but I've got, okay, since the Bedwetter, which was, I think that was number 5. There was the 6th Seed, that was number 2. 3 was the Adamson Family. 4 was Death Perception. 5 was the Bedwetter. 6 is Dead Cemetery or the Covenant Sacrifice, the horror gay romance. 7 is the Prosperity Society, which is a horror mystery. I just submitted that to a contest yesterday, so um, and then what else did I write? I wrote 2 novellas. I wrote Prosperity Society last year, and I wrote 2 novellas. One is called You Promise Me, which is supernatural, LGBT, and then Escape from Camp Gayaway, kind of a gay coming out story novella. And then what's the last one? Attack of the Zombie Spirits, which is combined zombies with ghosts. And that's kind of a prequel to the novel number 11 that I'm working on now, which is Attack of the Elder Ferals, which is this disease that breaks out among old people and deer, and they team up to try to infect the world with a
Oh
new
my
disease.
gosh. So
So
we have a lot to look
that's
forward
my
to.
second thesis novel. So
Oh
hopefully
wow.
I will find places for these.
I can't wait to see what comes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time out today.
Sure, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate your desire to talk to me.
Absolutely. Well, you have a wonderful day and thank you again.
Sure, you too. Bye, Rebecca.
Bye. Thank you again to Lee Allen Howard for joining us today. I'll have all of his links below. Go check him out, see what he has to offer, and I promise you, you won't regret it. I've read 2 of his stories so far and so many more to read, of course, but I've enjoyed them immensely, and I guarantee you will too. Again, if you like this video, like and subscribe below. Be sure to come back again when I'll have another guest with me. And thank you so much for joining us today.